Hello everyone, welcome to Escapees Webinars. My name is Georgianne and I'm the Marketing Director for Escapees RV Club. Today we're talking with Nina Fussing, a full-time RVer and owner of the RVing blog Wheeling It. She's going to share with us advice and experiences from her work camping adventures across North America. As she's talking, don't forget to submit your questions using the chat sidebar. Following her presentation, we're going to take 10 to 15 minutes to answer your questions, so make sure you stick around. Thank you again, Nina, for joining us. Will you take a couple minutes to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Nina. So hopefully, I don't know if the video is really bad on your end. It's a bit bad on my end, so I apologize if that's the case, but hopefully you can hear me and I come across okay.
Well, for those of you that are just joining us, welcome. We've got Nina Fussing here, and we're going to learn a little bit about her adventures with work camping and some of the things that she's done, some advice that she has for you if you're looking for that type of work and that sort of thing. So Nina, are you ready to take it away?
Okay, I'm going to launch into it. So hello, everybody. As Georgianne mentioned, what we're going to talk about today is work camping. And actually, I'm going to talk about kind of a specific slice of work camping. Work camping can be kind of any kind of work that you do while camping, while in your RV. But what I want to talk about today specifically is volunteer work camping at public parks. And basically what this is, it's you volunteer a certain number of hours. You don't get paid. You volunteer a certain number of hours, usually anywhere between 15 to 20, 25, 30. Some parks even require 40 in return for a free campsite. And there's actually, many reasons you'd want to do this. One is obviously you get free camping, which is kind of nice. And you can camp in a public park, really nice public park somewhere. But if you look at the actual number of hours that you put in and the price of the campsite, you might actually not be making quote unquote that much money. So really why we do it and why I think anybody should do volunteer work camping is because you really enjoy it. We truly love to volunteer. It gives us a sense of purpose. We do educational type volunteering and we love to do that. We interact with people. And it's just something that we truly enjoy doing. And that's something that I would encourage you to do if you decide to volunteer, is find something that you truly enjoy. And that will make the volunteer work camping experience so much worth it. Now, first things first is what kind of jobs can you find out there? There are actually an amazing array of jobs that you can do volunteer work camping at public parks. A lot of people think of traditional camp hosting. Let's say you're a camp host at a state park. You're the person that maybe you're greeting people as they come in. You go around and you clean sites when people leave, stuff like that. That's a very traditional job. But there are lots of others. And this can be in federal parks. It can be in wildlife refuges. It can be in state parks. It can be in county parks. And to give you an idea of that, I'm actually going to read out the number of jobs at a specific park that we used to work camp at, which is Bullard's Beach State Park in Oregon. And they actually have 6 different types of jobs there. So this will give you an idea of what you can do. They have a yurt host. They have these structures called yurts, and people go in and they clean them on a daily basis. That's one of the jobs. They have a lighthouse host where they actually have a lighthouse on site and you are there, you do the tours and you interact with people at the lighthouse. That's what we do. We love to lighthouse host. That's our specialty. There's a relief host, which does the jobs of all the other people when they're off. There's a maintenance host. And these are people that just help with maintenance in the park, mending fences, stuff like that. They don't interact with people. They do gardening, basically. There's a snowy plover host. This is actually an area where the snowy plover nests around Bandon in Oregon. And so this is a job that's done in conjunction with a local wildlife refuge. And basically, people go out and they protect the snowy plover's nests. And then there's a program post, and these are the people that run the evening programs and also the kids education programs. So that's just one state park in one state. And so it gives you an idea of kind of the breadth of stuff you can do. And you can do these jobs solo, or you can do them as a partner. Not all of them require partners. Some of them do some of the lighthouse hosting jobs. They like to have 2 people on site, but some of them can be done solo. And for example, of the jobs that we've done, we've hosted at 3 different lighthouses as tour guides. We hosted at an education center up on Orcas Island, up in Washington, and I solo hosted a month when Paul couldn't work. I solo hosted at the Lewis and Clark Museum in Washington, in Cape Disappointment, Washington. So solo jobs and partner jobs, they're all out there. You just have to look around if you are a single looking for doing this kind of thing. Now, the other thing is where to find them. Now, there's a couple places I recommend you look. If this is your first time looking at volunteer hosting, a really great website is volunteer.gov, and they have a lot of the federal's positions from all over the U.S. And there's all kinds here. You can look for interpretive hosting, you can look for camp hosting, you can look for maintenance hosting. So there's lots of different types of jobs on volunteer.gov. You can also look at the Fish and Wildlife website, and if you're looking at state parks specifically, I would recommend you go to the state park and you find their volunteer site. Almost all the state parks have some kind of volunteer site. Some of them are centrally coordinated. So for example, in Oregon, there's a central group that coordinates all the volunteer stuff. In Washington, there's the same. Some of them are more dispersed. So it depends on the state. You just have to look it up. And then once you find that, you can search the jobs, you can contact them and see if there are positions available. Usually you tell them what kind of job you'd like to do, and then and when you'd like to do it. And then they tell you what kind of positions might be available. And sometimes you might have to send in an application and wait and see. One thing is, a lot of the federal positions, you should be aware of this, will require background checks. In Oregon, we could do the background check online. In Washington, we actually had to send in fingerprints. So you probably will have to do a background check beforehand, and you do want to give it a little bit of time. So if you want a job, say a season or 2 seasons from now, now is probably the right time to apply for it. You might get some last minute cancellations. In fact, that's how we got our first job. We applied, I think, in May, our first year, for June. And we weren't really expecting to get anything. And the job that we wanted, which was in the whale watching center, was gone. But we talked to the guys, and a month later, they called us and said, hey, we have a last minute cancellation. Do you want this job? So there are opportunities to get last minute jobs, but generally you do want to plan a couple of seasons ahead. The other thing is, and this is a personal recommendation that I feel is really important. If you're applying through a central thing online, I really, really recommend that you try to call the people too and talk to them. And not just the central coordinator, but also the park where you are planning to volunteer. I find it makes a huge difference to your chances of actually getting the job. There are a lot of people that send in online applications. Some jobs can be very popular, especially certain times of year. And if you've talked to the coordinator, if they've seen you, or you've had a conversation on the phone, they are more likely to remember you and choose you as the person that's going to get the job rather than somebody who just sent in an application. So I really do recommend a personal contact as well. If you decide to apply for a job. So even if you just go online, try to contact the sites directly. We also, as we were traveling around, we talked to a lot of volunteers in our first year before we started applying our second year, just to get a feel for the volunteer jobs and, did they like their job? How many hours were they doing? Who's the coordinator? So as we traveled around, if we found the park that we liked, we would find one of the volunteers, usually a camp host, and we would ask them all those questions. And that was also really helpful in getting us contacts that we used later down the line to find other jobs. So that's a personal recommendation that I would say you should all look at. Now, the other thing is, before you commit to a job, before you decide on the final yes, I kind of have a list of questions that I think are very important and that I would recommend you all look at if you're looking at your own jobs. And the first thing is, think a little bit about the weather. When we apply for jobs, we're always very aware of the weather in the time frame that we're planning to be there. So, for example, we like to be somewhere cool in the summer. So we look for areas like along the Oregon and Washington coast that are going to be fairly cool. In winter, we don't volunteer, but if we were volunteering in winter, we would look for somewhere warm. And, I also like to know the bug situation because I'm a bug magnet. So, think about the weather before you finalize on a job. Also, you want to think a little bit about where the job is located. Are you in the boonies or are you somewhere close to civilization? And you might have a personal preference for one or the other. Out in the boonies, you may or may not have any cell phone signal. You might be far away from the nearest grocery, but you may have a lot of solitude. It might be a really kind of easy job. You may love that. If it's really important to you to have an organic food store nearby, you need to have an internet signal, then those are important questions to ask or research to do before you take on the job to make sure your job is offering those things. The other thing is, are you outgoing or are you solitary? Obviously, if you're going to deal with the public, it is preferable that you're outgoing. If you're a solitary person, you might prefer a maintenance position, whereas if you're very outgoing, you might love to have the interpretive type position that we do, where we educate the public. And also, physical requirements are really important. Make sure you understand and feel you can handle the physical requirements of the job that you're planning to do. If you're going to have to stand up a lot or work physically cleaning, if you have to clean toilets, for example, for some people that's fine. For some people that's a deal breaker. So it's really important to understand the physical requirements, and don't feel that if you're not young and agile, that you can't get a job. There are lots of opportunities for jobs where you may not need a big physical requirement. You might sit in an office and help check in people, stuff like that. So there are opportunities for people, even if you are not fully physically able. Also, another thing that's really important is the commitment length. Some state parks specifically will allow you to commit for only a month at a time. Other state parks will require longer commitments. The same is true of federal positions. So we've always volunteered in Washington and Oregon where there's only a 1-month commitment. We did get a job. We did get accepted for a job in California once. But when we went through our list of questions, they sprung on us that they needed a 6-month commitment. And that was just something we were not willing to do for a place that we didn't know very well. So make sure you're willing to commit to the commitment before you do that. And then another thing that's really important to us that we always think about is pet friendliness. We personally would never work at a park that was not pet friendly because our pets are very important to us. So, for example, if we're working at a beach park, we want to be on a beach that we can take our dog. And that's probably a reason we would never volunteer at a Florida beach park, because we can't take our dogs there. So, and that's something that's important to us. It may not be important to you. But if your pets are part of your travel life, that's something you want to look into, is whether or not the place that you're going has good places you can walk your dog, is pet friendly. You may not be able to take your dog to work. For example, at the Lighthouse, when we volunteered there, we could not take our dog to work. But if you're a camp host, you may be able to take him around on the little golf cart or something like that. So, there are levels of pet friendliness, and you just want to look at that before you commit. So that's really kind of the main thing about finding a job and the right questions to ask for a job. And then the last thing is, once you do commit, assuming you've done all your work ahead of time, you've asked all your questions, you're well aware of what the job entails, how many hours, what they require of you physically and so forth. Then once you commit, do your best to be there, to stay for the commitment of the job. There may be extenuating circumstances where you have to, for whatever reason, stop a job. But if you've done your work beforehand, and assuming nothing else happens, then usually you should be able to stay out the commitment of your job. And I think that's the right thing to do whenever you pick up a volunteer job. So that's really kind of it for volunteering. I think that's really covered most of my questions. I can go on, Georgina, if you're ready, if everybody is ready, I can start to ask or answer some questions.
Sure. One of the ones that was asked early on, Linda asked, how long is the season? Is it, for example, is it the same as our typical 3-4 month seasons, or is it different when you think about busy season versus slow season?
Totally depends on the park. So, for example, federal parks might require you to volunteer for a season, and they might define that as 4 months. It depends on the season for them. In California, they wanted us for a 6-month season. So I think it just depends on the individual park. And like I said, in Oregon, we could do it for a month at a time. So it just depends on the park.
Okay. Kathy has asked, do the sites send a 1099 for any benefits received?
No, they do not, because there's no money exchanged. This is a volunteer job, so it falls under the volunteer regulations, and there is a part of the IRS somewhere around there that talks about volunteering. If it requires you to be present as part of the effort, then it's not considered taxable. So you get a free site. You do not get any money or income. So there is no 1099.
Okay, that makes sense. Andrea has asked, are there any tips you have to enhance an application for a work camping job?
Well, most work camping jobs will have a kind of an application thing where they will ask you a bunch of questions. So, for example, if you're trying to get an interpretive type position, they will ask you whether you're comfortable presenting in front of people, whether you've done this kind of thing before. And so obviously you want to write stuff in that application that'll help you. So let's say you were part of the debate team, or you did some presentations in your job, that'll help you. And then the other thing, which I always recommend, and it was part of what I talked about in the presentation, is definitely follow up with a phone call. Try to get in contact with the people who are responsible for the jobs, both at the state park and the coordinators if they're central coordinators, because if they hear from you, they are more likely to remember you, and I think it gives you an edge to getting a position. We've always had success getting positions where we've physically been able to either meet with or talk to the coordinators. So we've always made an effort to try and do that, as well as sending in an online application.
That's a really great tip. I know even when it comes to looking for paying positions, that's a similar situation. So that's a really great tip for people.
Absolutely.
something I'm curious about is what advice do you have for people who may be traveling with their family and considering these types of positions? Are there positions out there that are at least family friendly, and that if you have children with you, you could still do them?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we've actually met quite a few families that are work camping. Again, it just depends on the job. For example, you could have one partner work camp while the other partner does not. If you have young children and you want, one partner to stay with the young children, if the kids are old enough, say they're teenagers, they may be able to participate in the work camping. We know one family who did that. It just depends. Um, um, and and it also depends on whether the job has fixed hours or not fixed hours. For example, an interpretive type position that we do, which is we go to a lighthouse and we give tours. There are opening and closing times for the lighthouse, so our job has very fixed hours. Whereas somebody who's a camp host who really just needs to stay by their site and be around the campground has more flexible hours and is able to be home. So absolutely, we've met families who are volunteer hosting. We have met singles who are volunteer hosting. And most of my experience is around state parks, but there's also wildlife refuges. There are public, there are other federal parks out there. There's BLM. So there's all kinds of different places. But yeah, absolutely. We've met all types.
Okay. So then it sounds like for someone who possibly has a partner that needs to hold on to a full-time remote job, it would still work that they could stay back at the site and do their thing while the other person goes out and volunteers. So that sounds awesome for pretty much any type of RVer that's interested in it.
Absolutely. And the only thing that might vary, that might different is, and again, it depends on the park, is how many hours you might have to give. So the park might say, okay, it's 20 hours for the site if both of you are work camping. But if a single is work camping, it might be more hours. It just depends. Not all parks are like that, but it's always worth asking how many hours. You need to know how many hours. But yeah, I've single work camped because we had a family issue that came up for Paul, and I just decided to ask. I said, well, is there a single job? And they gave me a single job. So, and we've known partners where one partner has worked and the other one has decided not to volunteer. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. So a couple questions about background checks. Jody asked, what is involved in the background check?
So usually it's it's all on their side. So I actually don't really know. They check your police background, I guess, your federal background. I did it online with Oregon, and we went to a police station, got fingerprinted, and sent those in for Washington because that's what they require. And I guess they check your criminal record, see if you have anything on there. And honestly, since we don't personally have a criminal record, I don't know how that would impact volunteering, so I couldn't answer that question. But I know they do check for your record, whatever your public record is. And I'll be honest, I'm not sure exactly what that entails, but there usually is some kind of background check entailed.
Okay. So something Nosh should ask that kind of ties into that. Do you know if volunteer.gov can access your fingerprints captured with your global entry card?
No. And I know that for a fact because I have a global entry card. I also have a green card that I had to be fingerprinted for, and none of those could be accessed because none of the agencies are linked. What surprise, surprise. So no, if they require fingerprints, which Washington did, Oregon did not, for us, and California didn't either. They were not requiring it. So Washington may be unique in that respect. I don't know. But no, they can't access any other fingerprinting you've done. You've got to do it all again.
Okay. So then Karen has asked, do the applicants pay for the background checks themselves?
No, we never have. I wouldn't be able to say if that's true everywhere. We have never personally had to do that. We did have to mail in our fingerprints after we'd done them. And I think we had to pay when we went to get fingerprinted at the police station, I think we paid a nominal amount, like $5 or $10. But yeah, no, we personally never had to pay. I don't think it's usual that you have to pay.
Okay. Steve has asked, and I think some may have already answered him, but Steve has asked, can you repeat the website again that you recommended?
Oh, okay. So volunteer.gov. That's a great place to start. And I would also look at the Fish and Wildlife website. And if you're interested in a particular state, wherever, Florida, Georgia, Oregon, look at the state park website and try and find their volunteer section. It'll be different for every state, but usually every single state has a volunteer section.
Okay. Out of curiosity, what interested you to even start doing this type of work camping to begin with?
Well, I've always volunteered in some form or another since I was really young. I've mostly worked with animals, but I've always enjoyed presentation type, public interaction type stuff. And when we started RVing, we already knew right away that we wanted some of it to be volunteering. We wanted to spend a certain number of months each year just in a fixed location, somewhere we love, giving back a little bit to the community and interacting with people. And so that's how we started off with the first job. We just signed up for a month. And we didn't originally target Lighthouse hosting. That was just because somebody had a cancellation and they said, "Oh, how'd you like to be Lighthouse hosts?" And turns out we are Lighthouse nutters now. So it's been really, really positive. And we loved it so much that we applied for another job, and we've done it every single year because we just really enjoy it.
That's fantastic. So thinking about this, how far in advance to request these, Linda has asked if it's recommended to book 2 seasons in advance. Would that mean 2 years beforehand, or just like, for example, if you're trying for the fall, you would then request by the previous winter or spring?
Exactly, the latter. By 2 seasons, and I know somebody else asked what's a season, and I was very evasive with that answer. But yeah, when I mean booking 2 seasons in advance, I mean like if it's winter and you want to be looking for your summer job. And some people even look further ahead. Some people book a year ahead if they're really organized. We never have. We've always booked about, if it's winter, we start contacting all the guys we know for our summer jobs. And once you've worked in a place once before, you usually get a little bit of priority for the next time around. So that's also helpful. But yeah, I would recommend about 6 months before you plan to volunteer is a good time. If you're more organized, you can go out further, but that would be about a good time.
Okay, you may have already answered this, but I know you mentioned having volunteered in Washington and Oregon. Have you done anything on the East Coast?
We have not, no. And that's because we're lighthouse nutters. And there's not a lot of positions on the East Coast. There are a few lighthouses where you can volunteer on the East Coast. Actually, Cape Hatteras is one of them. But they require 40 hours a week there when we looked into it, and it was booked out far in advance. So we looked into it. We decided it was a little more than we wanted to do for the volunteering. When we're in Washington and Oregon, we give about 17 to 20 hours a week. And since we still have stuff that we do for real money on the side, that was about the right amount of level for us. So yeah, we're a bit limited because we're so crazy about lighthouses. But that's the only reason really we haven't really volunteered outside of the Pacific Northwest. But you never know, it might come. So we're still working on it.
Oh, well, it's a beautiful area. There's plenty to see up there.
Yes.
Okay. Well, at this point, I believe we've answered all the questions that have been asked. Do you have anything extra you'd like to add?
Um, no, I mean, I think obviously we love volunteering. We think it's a great way, even just to spend a little bit of time. You get a free campsite. You can be in a place you love. I would recommend everybody try it at least once, and see if it's something they would like to incorporate in their RV lives, because it really is, I personally think, very rewarding. And so I hope you will give it a go at some point.
I do know that you write quite a bit about your work camping experiences on your blog. Would you mind talking about that for just a moment so people know where to find you and where to find some of that information to refer to later?
Sure. What a nice plug. So yeah, it's so my blog is wheelingit.us. Wheels as in wheels that turn. And you will find I actually have a tab on the blog near the top that's called volunteering. And I have every single one of our jobs that we've done. I've written in detail what the job involved, what our site was like. Did we get full hookups? Was there good internet access? Did we like the job? And then I also did a whole series on what we're talking about today, which is basically finding a job, how to find a job, what questions to ask. So all those questions that I went through there in a blog post, and how to secure the job. And also all the sites that I talked about. So if you want to go read, just go to the blog wheelingit.us, click on the volunteering tab, and you'll be able to find hopefully a bunch of info. And I also have a section specific to lighthouse hosting, because we are crazy about lighthouses. So if that's something that interests you, you can look at that. I probably should put in links to other people, because I know many people who are crazy about birding and who host at wildlife refuges and stuff like that. So there are other crazies out there, just they're crazy in other ways.
We've had a couple more questions trickle in the last few minutes. So Jim has asked, do you have any information on work camping at private campgrounds?
So I do not. We have not done, well, I do have some information, but we have not personally done any. Workamper, I think workamper.com is a great place to go to look at, start learning about other types of work camping jobs. I do know people at private campgrounds, it varies a lot as to whether, how many hours you give, what the dollars that you might get, because there is usually money involved there. Not always, but a lot of work camping jobs will pay. They won't pay huge money, but a lot of work camping jobs will pay. So I would look at Workamper. I would also go on Facebook and look at the Workamper Facebook group. And you will find lots of people there that do specifically that. They work camp at public parks, or they do other kinds of work camping. So there's lots out there.
There's another resource. If you're an Escapees member, you can go and look at our job board at escapees.com once you log in. And
oh, yes.
I know that just in the last couple of days, maybe the last week, we've announced several open positions, even at our own parks, at the Rainbow Parks. But also other campgrounds will hop on and post open positions on our job board as well.
That's another great little tip. And somebody did ask, Stephanie asked, what size RV we have. That's a good question, Stephanie. We have a 40-foot Class A, so a big beast of an RV. And that actually it is an important question, because not all volunteer jobs that you do can take all size RVs. If you are, say, at a small national forest campground up in the mountains somewhere, you might not be able to get in there with a big RV. So that is an important question. It's one of the things that we make sure when we're applying for a job and getting a job, is whether or not they can accept our size RV, and also what kind of hookups they have. So when we're volunteering, we do prefer full hookups. But not all jobs, if you're out in the boonies somewhere, you might not get full hookups, but you might love being out there. So.
Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate all the information that you shared with us about work camping and your own experiences, your website, even just some resources for other people to check out, maybe things you haven't done before. So I really appreciate everything that you shared. At this point, like I said, we've got most of the questions covered, and I believe that that's all that we have. Let me make sure. Yes, we didn't miss anything. Well, on that note, thank you again, Nina, for sharing your time with us, and thank the rest of you. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.
Yep. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Bye-bye.